For more than 60 years, Bunyan Communications has been connecting people in the area around Bemidji, Minnesota to the larger world. It started with telephone services way back in the 50s, and in the 90s morphed into internet and television services. And that's when I met Gary Johnson. He is currently, he's been the CEO for a while now of Bunyan Communications. And in the time that I've known you, Gary, you've rebuilt your network several times. You've expanded your service area. You've overbuilt incumbent operators who really weren't willing to upgrade their networks the way your company has. Your network is large. It's almost as large as the Bay Area, about 5,500 square miles, and it covers a huge area from the headwaters of the Mississippi to your home in Bemidji. And we're going to talk to you, but we're also going to talk to a close partner of Bunyan, and that's the Greater Bemidji, the economic development agency for the region. And you know, I think the tagline sums up their goal, which is driving development, promoting prosperity. So with that, we have Dave Hengel. He's the executive director, and he's going to join us in today's conversation and talk about what makes this area special. You know, first, congratulations. PC Magazine also recognizes you're special. You've just taken the 8th place in their best place to work from home in 2021. So we'll start with broadband and how that impacts that scoring, because that contributed to 20% of their score. So Gary, why don't you describe the broadband network you guys have developed and what it means to remote work for a robust connection?
Thanks, Ken, and thanks for teeing up this conversation today. As you know, we're proud of what we're doing here, and just like many of our peers in the industry, you know, there's a lot of good things going on. But specifically to our network, we are virtually all fiber to the prem. And so that's taken a lot of work. In fact, we started this process, right after 2000, you know, shortly thereafter. And in fact, we haven't put anything in the ground other than fiber since 2004. So it's taken some work to get to the point where we can say we're fiber to the prem everywhere. But what a great effort, what a great investment. I'm certainly glad we've done it, because now more than ever, particularly with the pandemic, it's really showing why it's important to have a robust infrastructure. So in Bemidji, you know, as PC Magazine noted, you know, fiber to the premise with robust upload and download speeds. And it's kind of ironic, you know, we've been talking about uploads and downloads, and we've been trying to figure out how do you market that in a meaningful way to consumers, you know, to really demonstrate why it matters to have a symmetrical network. But COVID kind of took care of that marketing for us. You know, with everybody now doing Zoom and what have you, it's readily apparent why it matters, why you can't have, you know, robust downloads and then just poultry upload speed. So yeah, so it's very symmetrical, 1 gig in both directions. And these days, now more than ever, it's been super important to have that. And that's a big part of, I think, the PC Magazine reference as well. And
you're also going into the home too, in terms of making sure that network works from the PC or the smartphone or whatever their device is all the way out, right?
Yeah, that's right. You know, gone are the days where you hit the D mark on the side of the house and call it good. I mean, we're really building a robust data network in every home or business that we're serving. So yeah, for sure. In fact, that's, you know, it's really changed who we are and the skill sets and everything that we have to have for our employees and our installers, because like I said, they're not just running a copper wire to the side of your house. They're provisioning networks and multiple networks and wireless networks and making sure all your devices can connect. And, you know, we have an app that we use to really let them monitor those things as well as us back at the office. So, yeah, it's far more complex, but really it's exciting to see that part of our evolution to really now being that data network provider, because it lets you do so much more and have really a you know, pretty exciting relationship with the customers in delivering those services and capabilities that now everybody's relying on.
Well, I want to talk about your structure, but first I want to go to Dave. And it's hard to believe, I think, especially for kids, but humans cannot live on broadband alone. Apparently they can't. They need some other things. And there was another 80% of things that made Bemidji attractive. So why don't you talk to some of those?
Sure, it's a great topic to talk about for me. I love to talk about Bemidji because it's a bit of what I would call a hidden gem. And when I think about Bemidji, I think about the perfect size community for many people. It's about a community of about 65,000 people, around 15-mile radius, most of which live out in the lakes and pines of the area. And I talk about Bemidji being lumberjack chic, that we have these perfect balance of regional center amenities and this small town beauty and character that still exists amongst this community. And that includes local food places. And we've got dozens of locally owned restaurants. We've got arts and culture scene that is very unique to our area, but very robust for an area our size, and a quaint small downtown still that you can go and have just a wonderful night together, all at the same time. You're amongst the natural beauty in northern Minnesota, where you're able to have the outdoor recreational opportunities and such. And so, Bemidji is just it's a special place. It genuinely is a special place that is the right size, the right amenities, the right broadband to really appeal to a broad base of people.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned lumberjack, because I dressed appropriately for today's conversation. And speaking of lumberjacks, Gary, your company is named after a famous one. Why don't you talk about that for a moment, but talk about your corporate structure, because it's a little different than most people would associate with telecoms.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's right. And that difference really is, I think, what makes us tick, really. In fact, so we're a cooperative. We were formed in 1952, so we're approaching 70 years. And as you kind of alluded to already, our original function was to get voice service out to those areas that, for rural farmers, rural business people, they just couldn't have the voice service, telephone of the day, right? Ironically, though, almost 70 years later, it's the same exact mission. So we're still pushing those communication services out to areas where larger providers are just not doing it. And I think that's amazing that you can have such a changing world that we work in, and the technology just is so rapidly evolving. And our company is nothing like the company that was formed 70 years ago, or even 30 years ago when I started. It's nothing like that, but yet at our core, the mission is still spot on, and it's never been any more important than it is today, which is now, of course, is broadband we're getting out there, but it's still to those areas that otherwise won't get it. And we prove that over and over and over as we continue to expand into these areas that are unserved or underserved, neighboring our area. So yeah, so that's the structure of ours. And I think the fact we're a member-driven, not-for-profit cooperative, really, I love how it allows us to focus on mission and really about getting services out there. I mean, we can take some risks, and we can tolerate poor business models better than most in this structure. Now, we still have to be viable. You still got to pay the bills. You got to, so thankfully, there's been state and federal recognition of the need to really promote broadband and programs that support that. But yeah, having that mission driven focus is, I think, made it a great place to have a career, but also I think really meaningful to the people we serve, and speaks to why we're expanding so much. As to the Paul Bunyan, I don't know that I can the great historian on the lumberjack folklore, but certainly like so many things in Bemidji, we are certainly named after Paul Bunyan and Babe His Blue Ox. So, and that really obviously is just a nod to the very important forest industry that really is at the core of our history, and still is one of our primary businesses even today.
Well, and it's an interesting story of how you got started. The officials in Washington, D.C., as I understand it, the RUS officials, they said you had no chance, but it was people kind of taking a risk to make it happen, right?
Yeah, that's right. It's great looking back at that history where the challenge was large to even form this, be allowed to form it, and come up with the wherewithal financially to form it. And yeah, if it wasn't for, I think at the time, Senator Hubert Humphrey going to bat for us and kind of nudging that first federal loan from then, I guess, REA to get us on this path, I don't know that we'd be here today.
Well, and one of the things that I find interesting, I mean, you started not in Bemidji, but in these areas, even more rural or rural areas, where operators weren't serving. And I guess the question is, I find it interesting that the Greater Bemidji organization is focused on the greater region as well. And so, Dave, why don't you talk to that a little bit as an organization, how you take a regional approach?
Well, I think the economy works in a regional nature. I don't think if Bemidji is unique in this regard. So the city of Bemidji itself is about 1/3 of the population of what I would consider the Greater Bemidji region, and most people in this area happen to live out in the lakes and the pines and the forests of northern Minnesota, and so it seems awkward to have these made up geographic political boundaries when it comes to an economy. The economy, the labor force, the employment, all is really a regional nature. So logically, it makes sense for us to serve a larger regional approach.
It makes a lot of sense. And I would imagine during this time of 2020 and 2021, with everything going on, what has that meant in terms of people moving in to do remote work and that sort of thing?
Yeah, we've certainly seen a lot of it, and it's become a pretty big focus of ours right now because of the fact that, well, we've had multiple things happen. You mentioned PC Magazine being an example, but on top of that, Beltrami County, our county, was named #1 in Minnesota for broadband access to gigabit broadband, thanks to Gary's organization. That got us there. On top of that, the state of Minnesota has a new program called Telecommuter Forward certification. We were one of the first communities to be certified. So for very many reasons, it was a good time for us to really be focused on remote workers and its impact, not only because it was already starting, but we wanted to take advantage of it and encourage it even more. And so we just created and launched a program called 218 Relocate, 218 being our prefix of our phone code, area code up here. 218 Relocate is an opportunity for us to put what I would call our money where our mouth is. We believe strongly that this is a great place to live and work and operate a business. And so we provide up to $2,500 in financial incentive for people who relocate here. And they can use that to pay for their gigabit services and other relocation expenses. On top of that, we're offering free access to our co-working space. We call it the Launchpad. So not only can you work from home, you can come and be a part of a community as well. And then we also provide there's a place called Effective Remote Work, which is a company that specializes in helping the workers who are remote, really with their productivity and their ability to do well in working remotely. And so they get automatic access to that too. So it has become a major focus of ours simply because we think we're perfectly positioned to really support remote workers up here, and broadband being of course, a major factor in that.
So are you seeing people move in from the Twin Cities or California? Or
Yes, and in fact, and part of it is it's all over, and in some cases, it's people might have had a cabin up here in the Northwoods and decided to stay up here. Now, I had a phone call this morning. A person who works for one of the largest scientific firms in the Twin Cities has decided to work out of their cabin. And she also mentioned, by the way, that her broadband is better in her rural cabin north of Bemidji than it is in the Twin Cities metro area.
That's remarkable.
Mm-hmm.
And so from a Paul Bunyan standpoint, Gary, have you seen growth due to this, inward migration, I guess?
Yeah, absolutely. We've never been busier than we were in 2020. We've been growing, expanding for quite some time, but it really took a spike. And a lot of that's driven by the pandemic, of course. And I think that has just accelerated this adoption of work from home that we would have seen continue to grow anyway, but it just really lit it up. We had 1 month, I think it was in June, where we added 4% total subscribers in 1 month. So
wow,
it's a crazy spike. And that's tapered off a little bit, but it certainly continues that growth. And I think a large part is what Dave's talking about. And his example is a perfect one. Whereas, a lot of a city may have good broadband, a small town may have good broadband, but where it typically falls off is when you leave town, when you get 10 miles north of town, Well, those are the areas these people are hoping to live in, and where I live in, everyone really kind of looks to because of those natural amenities. But typically, those are the areas that don't have this type of broadband. And so, for us to have our fiber network across 5,500 to 6,000 square miles of all of that kind of territory is a real distinction, and that applies to everything from whether you're talking education or telehealth. I mean, that's where people are and want to live, and it has to be everywhere. And so while it's not unusual to find broadband in a city, it is very unusual to get it out everywhere. And that's what we're trying to do. And that's what many of our peers in the industry are trying to do. And that's that last part. Those most rural areas are the toughest, but are just as important. In fact, I'd argue in a lot of ways they're more important because those are always the same. Are often the same people that are that much further away from a hospital or that much further away from a school or a university or a job opportunity. So I think those last, hardest, most rural ones to build to are really the most important yet to do. So it's been good we've been able to do that.
Yeah, and from a reliability perspective, you have that experience of having to work with old copper networks or hybrid networks versus fiber. What about the reliability? Have you seen great improvements? Or
yeah, absolutely. Our trouble calls drop way down when it's a fiber to the prem network. Everything just runs a lot more robustly, and less weather issues. I mean, you can go down the list of the typical causes to trouble tickets in a telecom infrastructure, and really that where it's fully fiber to the prem, it really drops off. It's noticeably better than our copper that we used to run.
And I would imagine that's why kind of the next level was getting into the home, because that's probably where your problems is, kind of spurted up then. Is that back to that question?
That's right. Yeah, that's right. It's one thing to get fiber to the side of the house, but really we want to push that in the house as far as we can too. And as everything is so reliant on that last piece of the network being wireless. Whether that's for mobility or in your house, it's Wi-Fi. Every device we physically wire very few devices anymore. So that support pushes, into the fiber network, into the home. But then from that point on, we're also supporting that last leap to the wireless, right? Wi-Fi. So yeah, it's a whole different world than it used to be.
Yeah, and a lot of people believe that Wi-Fi is broadband and don't even know what broadband is. They just think Wi-Fi.
Yeah,
in my household.
A lot of truth to that. Yep, that term Wi-Fi is almost ubiquitous for broadband now. Yeah. In fact, we'll make a clear distinction about that. But it reinforces why it matters to us to provide good Wi-Fi, just like the good fiber. Gone are the days of just pointing and say, well, we got it to you. The rest is your problem. And now the whole experience is our problem as a provider. So it's not good enough to tell them they have gigabit to their house and we did our job. You have to really walk them through using the devices effectively and being satisfied with those devices, with the many twists and turns that means, right? In terms of wireless networking and all the trials and tribulations you might have with that. That's now part of our job as well.
Yeah, I would imagine from things, your cell coverage probably isn't great everywhere in the rural areas out there. So having reliable Wi-Fi would allow them to use their cell phone in their house or their yard or something, right?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, there are many areas that do not have effective wireless service and are using Wi-Fi calling on our broadband network to have the basic voice communications. Yep, absolutely.
Yeah, it never occurred to me before. So back to the PC Magazine article, a great article. One thing it failed to mention was Bemidji State University, the BSU. I mean, it's a great asset, it seems to me, in your community. Why don't you talk to that, both of you, either of you, and tell us what it means.
Well, certainly it's important to the economy. I mean, one of the things you think about when it comes to economic development is I tell my board all the time that economic development's become a race for talent. It's about a race of having people with talent that businesses can rely on, because everybody's looking for people, as we know. And so in the case of a race for talent, it sure as heck nice to have a university that's a creator of talent right here in our backyard. And if you look just in my industry, if you look at economic development, if you don't have a university nearby, it's very difficult to promote economic development in your region. And so in our case, Bemidji State's a huge partner for ours, as is Northwest Tech College. And we're also surrounded by 3 tribal colleges as well. So all of them are really significant partners in what we do in economic development.
Yeah, and I could add on to that, Ken. We've had a long relationship with Bemidji State University. They were one of the first state universities to kind of take a leap and get away from what was a typical voice contract with a large regional operator, and really recognize the benefit of working locally with a local communications provider. In our case, a Cooperative. They had to kind of get their head around what that meant in terms of benefits to them. And I give them a lot of credit. They were the first state, in our case, state university to make that leap. And we've been partners ever since for decades. And that's worked out really well. But to Dave's point, beyond, just a great customer provider relationship and doing great innovative things in terms of data and voice communications, we had the president of Bemidji State University walk around our office here. It's probably been a year ago, when we were still fully staffed and everybody's working there at their desks. And it was just a great reminder, as she walked from department to department. It didn't matter if you're talking customer service or IT or very technical things or operational areas. I'd ask our employees, my coworkers, how many of you are Bemidji State University grads? And invariably about half the room would raise their hands.
Wow.
And I think that was an eye-opener for me, just on the importance of Bemidji State University to our organization. But it was also an eye-opener to her. And I think that's been great in reinforcing this partnership we have and helping us have conversations about more technical skills and driving more of these talented young people, convincing them to stay in Bemidji, that there are opportunities and needs. And yeah, so it's a super important partnership, absolutely.
Well, and we should talk to some of the other things you guys are doing in the community. I mean, you're an Apple certified repair center, for instance, right? You have a pretty slick Apple-like retail room, it looks like.
Yeah, we do. And that's been a kind of a fun expansion for us. It leverages our skills our talented crew already have. And it really gives another avenue for us to help our members out rather than, it had been, you'd had to drive a long ways if you had actual Apple warranty work to do and you wanted a face-to-face interaction with that device. There isn't an Apple store in Bemidji. You have to drive some number of hours to find such a thing. So to be able to provide that service for our members is great. And at the same time, it's exciting for our staff to kind of branch out into those new areas. And there's certainly Apple gurus in the house that are doing a great job. And really enjoying that kind of new level and type of service that we can provide.
That's exciting. And back to Bemidji State, one of the things that I was impressed when I was there was the Sanford Arena, I guess is what it's called. I probably got it wrong. But you guys have been doing some pretty cool things there in terms of gaming. Why don't you talk to GigaZone Gaming?
Sure, yeah. Well, another fun thing we got into, we were talking with, again, having a really talented crew that we're very proud of, and how can we leverage those skills in more ways to benefit our members and benefit this region. And we settled on hosting our own gaming event. Certainly that was right in our staff's wheelhouse, but as you might imagine, it also is a very large, very important area for our region. And one that was really untapped in terms of having opportunities for young gamers to really get involved and have a arena style event. So yeah, it's not a couple folding chairs in a conference room. I mean, it's an arena style event. We're very proud of it. And our crew has built really from the ground up much of the software and scoring and everything that you might need to build this event with sound and light and everything to go with it. But it's been really fun to see the feedback from, I guess, several audiences. First, young people, and I say young people of all ages, gamers, that are expressing their gratitude to have something of this caliber here locally, something they really like to do. And quite often, in a lot of cases, there are folks that came up to us and told us, yes, it has. We have all the sporting events and other type of activities here, but this was lacking. And for some people, this is their thing. And now we have that in our region. So that was one audience, but another audience is certainly our own employees. You talk about having such a skilled team, and yes, they do a high quality tech support and all that. And if you hear them every day, yes, they might get the same question over and over on the phone, and they do a wonderful job dealing with those things. But it is nice to really have an event like this where they can really leverage the skills and interest, and they've just done a really great job building this whole thing. And finally, you mentioned Bemidji State, but our broader recruitment of very sought after IT technology and technical skills. Finding people with those skill sets is a challenge, as Dave alluded to, that race for talent. Well, we know we have internship programs that maybe had 1 or 2 interns, and pre our GigaZone Gaming event, after we'd get dozens of applications, and invariably it would say, well, how'd you hear about us? And it's GigaZone Gaming. That's how they created that relationship with us. And so recruiting is huge. And then just for our own staff, just their satisfaction with putting this on. It's been kind of a win-win-win. And I guess finally, I'm proud of it as well. As imagine branding. I mean, yes, back in the day, we were Paul Bunyan Rural Telephone Cooperative. Well, nothing screams to a young IT talent like I've got to work for something called, So to instead kind of reposition yourself as, hey, I can stay in Bemidji. I can have a really cool leading edge technical job and do these really cool things right here. And it's for this company called Bunyan Communications and their GigaZone Gaming event. I mean, it's also had that image branding value as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. I love the logo on it as well. And it's very nice. And that kind of leads to the final questions. But one would be, Dave, how do you see this going forward? These these nice things that people are saying from PC Magazine, and how are you going to exploit that to kind of build on it and let the world know about the Greater Bemidji?
Well, I think it's important that when you think about you're promoting your region and you're promoting your community, you have to differentiate yourself from other communities, and certainly what Paul Bunyan has done here differentiates us. This is one where we have a very large all fiber network that allows you to go just about live anywhere you want to live, and so we're gonna use that in our marketing all over the community, or all over the state and region, I should say, and try and promote that 218 relocate. Also, certainly corporate relocation as well, or expansion here as well. And that has been a factor for us in the last few years. We've got a large corporation that moved to our community, in part because of what Gary and his team provided, and that they came from a corporate headquarters in downtown Minneapolis and found that they could get better broadband service here than either in Minneapolis or their place in Michigan. And so we're going to take advantage of using that differentiation that Paul Bunyan's able to provide, and our broadband network's able to provide, to really recruit both talent and companies.
That makes sense. And Gary, I'm going to shift a little bit back to kind of comments you made earlier about the idea of getting broadband everywhere. And I wanted to get your thoughts on the new FCC program, the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program. It's a temporary program. It has $3.2 billion to allot, and they'll give it out as kind of a voucher, if you will, for people to use to get broadband. And it's a 6-month program, or whenever the money runs out. And there's also some of the money could be used for devices. So with that as context, any thoughts on that program?
Yeah, I'm very glad to see the recognition that there's 2 parts to effective, equitable access to broadband. And one is certainly have access. And that's been the conversation for many years, as I'm glad it has been. So you push hard, you have these programs to help you invest in the infrastructure. But the second piece is affordability. And, our area, like many, it's a challenge for everyone to afford broadband. So access is one thing, affordability is the other. I'm glad it appears that at a federal level, they're keeping the eye on both of those issues. We have a lot of work left to do in terms of access, but everywhere you can find examples of issue with affordability. And so I'm very excited that was part of the stimulus. We're watching that very close. I know the FCC is working through reply comments and such. I hope they get that program out the door quickly. It has both a regular component and actually additional benefits for tribal areas. We have 3 reservations that we provide some service to in our area. So that tribal piece is also very welcome and important. But we'll see how it goes. I hope they can lean on established protocols and processes and programs for eligibility screening and what have you. I know there has to be that check and balance to that program. We don't want it to be extremely complex or some new way that providers like ours have to get involved with financial screening. I hope they lean in hard on existing programs and those processes. And assuming they do that, I'm very excited that that there is this bucket of money out there, because truly we've seen, even when the pandemic first hit and we saw schools scrambling with less than a week's notice, right, to suddenly have all their students from home. And that was true in our area where you have 100% fiber to the prem. So yes, it was also true in some of our neighboring areas where there was access issues and what have you. But and we worked on both. We worked on quickly trying to establish, push our network out to those that didn't have it. But what was very clear is there are people right in our own area that also very much have access, but the affordability was the issue. So, and it's so important, access for everyone to have it in an equitable way, urban, rural, poor, or not. I mean, we have to figure that out. And so that type of program, which really tries to get after that affordability piece, is welcome. And my only hope is they can figure out how to do it. Maybe they can't do it to a $50 a month or $75 a month scale long term, but I hope there's some recognition that programs like Lifeline and others that are aimed at trying to get after the affordability piece really need attention and perhaps to grow, so we can better address that component of getting access out there as well.
Yeah, because in your case, I mean, ultimately, your owners, which are their subscribers, end up having to pay for the service in one form or another. So from you provide capital credits back, but I mean, ultimately, you have to pay for it, right? I mean, it's
yeah, well, that's right. And I mean, we're still a business that has to operate with expenses. And keep in mind, as a cooperative, a not-for-profit cooperative, we keep our rates as low as possible because all of our margins get returned to our members anyway. So,
right.
You try to walk that line. But even with, I think, competitive rates for the services we're providing, it still is an uphill climb for a number of people in our region. So, yeah, we need this kind of program.
Yeah, it'll be interesting. I mean, I think the interesting challenge to it is that limited time frame and how that plays out. But I guess we'll know more.
Yeah, perhaps it'll demonstrate this other part of this conversation about affordability. They'll see hopefully robust adoption. Sadly, that'll probably mean we'll go through the fund very fast. But maybe that'll convince our state and federal legislators that they need to keep an eye on this issue as well. Yeah,
no, it's clearly that could be a talk for another time. But another thing is moving into the future. I've been following things like autonomous mobility and electric aviation and things that are kind of out there, but maybe not that far out there, and it could have huge impacts on communities such as Bemidji, that a couple hours away from the Minneapolises of the world and so forth. What are your thoughts, both of you, on kind of new things that we should be looking forward to that will help draw people to areas like where you live?
It's hard to imagine what exactly the technology will be, but we know that the network we're putting in is really the robust core of any of those things that you can imagine. And I don't care if you're talking about the next wired technology or wireless technology, is all riding on this fiber network. So, with all the potential that 5G has, and it certainly does, it's very evident you're going to need a lot of fiber to do those technologies that leverage 5G capability. And I think that is so makes me feel really good about the investment we've made. It's not just an investment for getting broadband to somebody's house or to their business, but it really is this backbone spine of our region that can be built upon, whether it's the wireless providers or new innovations that we'll provide. It's all going to ride on that network. It's hard to imagine a technology, you listed several, that'll be void of data, right? That, that next autonomous vehicle that really doesn't need to talk to anything, doesn't really need any data connectivity. It's hard to imagine any technology that's going to come that isn't at its core very dependent on data, and probably more and more all the time. And if that's the case, it's got to ride on something. And it's not going to ride on a 5G signal very far. So it's going to have to ride on these fiber networks. So I feel good that, our members have invested millions and millions of dollars over now, nearly 2 decades just on fiber networks. And I think that's building a very good baseline foundation for our regions to succeed, whatever that next technology is.
Well, before we go to Dave, I want to build on that a little bit. The 5G, I'm glad you mentioned that, because every conversation has to have that at least as one buzzword. But seriously, on the 5G, are you doing a lot of work as far as selling backhaul, cellular backhaul for other carriers because they don't have the fiber out there, and you're helping get the traffic back from their cell towers? Is that a business for you guys?
Yeah, we do a lot of that, Ken. We really do. And as they push more broadband and more capacity across those wireless networks, more and more, they're not accomplishing it with microwave backhaul or copper circuits. The preferred course now is obviously a fiber network. So yes, we do feed a lot of towers in our region with fiber for providers, all kinds of national and regional providers. We elected some time ago not to be in the wireless business, and I know many of our peers are, but we have just simply focused on that fiber broadband network. But that would make you think we're not part of that wireless mobility world, and in fact, we're very much a part of that. We own several towers that we do lease space on, but more importantly is this connectivity we're doing all over our region. And in some cases, it's a great partnership that really becomes an anchor for you to do end user services. So it's not unusual to get a contract to build to a tower and provide high capacity fiber services to multiple networks, and then be able to build to the homes you pass along the way, or to the businesses or a small community. So that relationship we have with wireless, although we're not an end user wireless provider, is a real big part of what we do, and a big part of how we can expand and choose to grow in the future too.
They become kind of an anchor tenant for you in your expansion, it sounds like.
Yeah, they really do. And as you look at 5G, that's just going to be more and more true. I mean, these high capacity frequencies that they're looking at, the millimeter wave kind of technology, is great for urban areas, but it's hard to imagine how that replicates out into a rural area. So they are going to be putting up towers, and they are going to have to feed them with fiber. And a lot of them, I think, even without millimeter wave technology, that to get real coverage and leverage that technology out in a rural way. So we'll see. I still drop a voice call, anytime between the office and home. So there's a spot where I can't make a voice call. So I don't want my autonomous vehicle quite yet on that road, but we'll hope that progress continues.
Well, you did define it very well. Autonomous means it doesn't need, and you don't want it to have that radio to rely on in driving. So I was just at a panel about that the other day, and that was the consensus from Waymo and Ford and others.
That's good.
So Dave, what are your thoughts on the future?
Boy, I wish I knew, but I will tell you, I've enjoyed listening to Gary talk, because it was about 25 years ago when I met Gary for the first time, and he was standing in front of my board and saying, someday Paul Bunyan Communications, or actually at the time Paul Bunyan Rural Telephone Cooperative, is going to be a broadband provider. That was 25 years ago.
Wow.
And so when Gary says, we'll see what the future holds, I think I'll see what the future holds too. But I will reiterate what he said about the future-proof nature, essentially, of fiber. I mean, there's nothing more in terms of broadband more future-proof than fiber itself. And so I feel real good about whatever the future sends us, we'll be prepared for as best we can because of places like Paul Bunyan. One of the things I'll just mention broadband has just in my industry alone has rewrote the whole rules. Everything about economic development has changed because right now people, businesses, they can locate wherever they want, literally wherever they want. And that changes the rules for rural areas in particular, have opportunities they would have never had in the past. We're blessed in Bemidji because Paul Bunyan has provided us those opportunities. And so I'm looking forward to the future. I think it's a bright future for rural regional centers like Bemidji.
That makes sense. And I think I hear the dog barking. So that means this interview is about to end. But I really appreciate your time. It's always great catching up to you. I wish we were in person, of course. But thank you again. And best of luck as you continue moving forward.
Thank you.
Thanks, Ken.